And we know the story going forward, and the next big narrative, of course, is what happens in the law. So I'm skipping ahead here, and we come to Moses and the Exodus account. And again, there's a lot of misunderstanding of what's going on, but I'm skipping over a lot. So Moses is bringing out the children of Israel, and they signs, wonders, and miracles, and they cross through over the Red Sea. And then they enter the wilderness, and they're about to enter into the promised land, and we know that lies were spread. They feared going into the promised land, and of course God sent them on their wilderness journey for 40 years. But in that time, before they reached Mount Sinai, they were thirsty, and they wanted water, and God told Moses to speak to the rock and bring forth water. And as Garcia's reminded us, that Moses struck the rock instead of speaking to it. And in Moses' anger and frustration towards the people, he portrayed God as angry by striking the rock. And the consequence of that, of course, was that Moses would not enter the promised land. But that started to set the mind of the people who had never encountered this God before, who came from a culture of Egypt where the only God that they knew was Pharaoh. And he was fierce, and he was angry, and he was vindictive and petty. And that is the slave mindset, that mindset that they came out of Egypt with. So now they have this new God. Well, they're encountering their God that they've never had much, apart from the stories of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and legend that's been passed down. But now they're interacting with it, and the concept that they have as a slave mentality is Pharaoh, right? This wicked, evil caricature that claimed to be a god. But nonetheless, the children complain, and they get water. Moses strikes the rock, and again, the striking of the rock portrayed that narrative that God was an angry, like Pharaoh kind of thing, and it set the tone of the people. They complained again, and they got manna from heaven. And then later they complained again, and eventually they got the birds, the quail, the meat from heaven. But something happened after they had the encounter at Sinai. So at Mount Sinai, we know that there's the introduction of the law. So God said to Moses, sanctify the people. I want them all to come up. I will be their God. You will be my people. Everybody had direct access. That was God's original intent. But when we read the story again, I think it's in Leviticus chapter 5, verse 23, we see the elders of Israel come to Moses and they say, okay, we have heard God's voice and we haven't died. But please tell him to stop talking to us, because we are pretty sure that if we keep hearing his voice, he will consume us like fire. So that orphan spirit, that slavery spirit, that mindset of a Pharaoh-type God, inbred into the people, ingrained into the people, got them to think that God was eventually going to turn on them and bring judgment upon them. And they basically rejected God's first offer of, I will be your God, you will be my people. And they said, Moses, you go. Get the law, get the rules, we'll obey. But we don't want to hear God again. So out of Israel's rejection of God's plan, and God wanting to have relationship, he says, okay, you don't want the covenant that I have for you, the promise that I have for you, everybody has direct access, I'll submit to what you want. You want the rules? Here are the rules. And he gives us the 10 Commandments. Immediately after the 10 Commandments, we start to see an outbreak of sin. They've been traveling this whole time. We never see anything about them wanting to make a golden calf before, or any of these kinds of things. And as Moses comes down, there's this huge debauchery celebration and a golden calf. And of course, we know the story that in the confrontation, 3,000 people died. Now, all before that, that was never an issue. All before that, all their murmuring and complaining and stuff like that, there was grace. God would give them what they want. But for the first time at Mount Sinai, there's been a change. And that change is the covenant of Moses. And a covenant is an agreement or a relationship. It's a declaration of how God is going to deal with man. And we see over a course of events that they do the exact same thing that they did before Sinai. They complain and they murmur, but instead of getting the water and the bread and the meat, they get the earth opens up and swallows them. They get snakes that come out and bite them. And they're doing the same thing. But the difference is the covenant has changed. At Sinai, the covenant is now do good, get good. Do bad, get bad. And that goes on, and we know